The suitcase was gone, my wife was gone, and the only thing she had left behind was a folded note on our kitchen counter that said, "I need some space. Please don't look for me." I stood there for nearly an hour, staring at those 6 words while the afternoon sunlight moved slowly across the floor, because after 12 years of marriage, I had never imagined that my wife, Maren, could disappear from my life without even giving me the dignity of a goodbye. If you believe kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances can sometimes save a broken heart, please take a moment to like this video, leave a comment, share this story with someone who may need hope today, and subscribe to our channel so our community can continue sharing stories that remind us that love is sometimes worth fighting for. My name is Everett, and until that morning, I believed I knew my wife better than anyone. Maren was the kind of woman who remembered birthdays, carried extra umbrellas in her car, and cried whenever she saw an elderly couple holding hands in public. She had a soft heart, but she also carried a stubborn pride that made it difficult for her to admit when she was hurting. We had met at a small bookstore years earlier, married after 2 years, and built a quiet life together in a modest house with a blue front door and a garden Maren loved more than anything. We never had a perfect marriage. We argued about money, work, family, and the ordinary frustrations that slowly build between 2 people who spend years sharing the same kitchen, the same bills, the same responsibilities, and the same dreams. But I had always believed that whatever happened, we would talk about it. That belief shattered on a bright Saturday morning when I woke up and realized Maren's side of the closet was half empty. Her favorite suitcase was missing, several dresses were gone, and the bathroom shelf looked strangely bare. At first I thought she had planned some surprise, maybe a weekend away with her friends. Then I noticed the note. There was no explanation about where she had gone, no phone number, no promise to call, and no indication of when she would return. I immediately tried calling her, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I sent messages, then deleted them because they sounded desperate. I called her closest friend, Tessa, but she claimed she had no idea where Maren was. I wanted to believe that. I desperately wanted to believe that my wife had simply needed a little time to breathe. But the truth was that something had been wrong for months. I had noticed Maren becoming quieter at dinner. She stopped telling me about her day and began answering simple questions with tired smiles. Sometimes I would come home from work and find her sitting by the living room window, staring into the garden as though she were somewhere far away. I had asked her what was wrong more than once, but she always said she was fine. I believed her because believing her was easier than admitting that perhaps she was unhappy with me. Looking back, I realized how many signs I had ignored. She had stopped asking me to join her on weekend walks. She had stopped showing me funny videos. She had stopped reaching for my hand while we watched television. And instead of asking why, I told myself she was stressed. I had been working long hours because we were struggling financially. My company had lost several major contracts, and I was terrified of losing my job. I thought bringing home a paycheck was my greatest responsibility as a husband. I didn't realize that Maren needed something from me that couldn't be deposited into a bank account. She needed attention. She needed affection. She needed to feel seen. By late morning, I sat alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by the ordinary things of our life. 2 coffee mugs stood beside the sink. Her favorite blue mug still had a lipstick mark around the rim. A grocery list was attached to the refrigerator with a magnet shaped like a strawberry. There were photographs of us on the wall, including one from our 10th anniversary when we were laughing so hard that neither of us could look at the camera. Everything looked normal, yet nothing felt normal anymore. Then the doorbell rang. I expected a delivery driver or perhaps Maren's friend. Instead, when I opened the door, I found Maren's younger sister, Celeste, standing on the porch with a small overnight bag in her hand. Her eyes were red, her face was pale, and she looked as though she had been carrying something heavy for a very long time. She didn't step inside immediately. She simply looked at me, swallowed hard, and quietly asked if she could come in. Something about her expression frightened me. Celeste had never been especially close to me. She was protective of Marin and had always kept a careful distance, as if she believed husbands could never fully be trusted with their sisters' hearts. But she wasn't angry that afternoon. She looked exhausted. I moved aside, and she entered the house. She placed her bag beside the sofa and sat down without taking off her coat. I asked her whether she knew where Marin was. Celeste looked toward the window for a long moment before telling me that Marin had gone away with a few friends, but the trip wasn't the real reason she had left. That sentence hit me harder than anything else. I realized there was a story behind the story, something my wife had been carrying that I had never been brave enough to uncover. Celeste explained that Marin had been planning the trip for several weeks, but she hadn't intended to disappear from me. She had been terrified that if she stayed, she would lose control and say things she couldn't take back. She had been feeling invisible in our marriage. She had begun believing that my work mattered more to me than she did. Celeste told me that Marin had cried while packing, not because she wanted to leave me, but because she was afraid I wouldn't even notice how unhappy she had become. I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to say that I had been working for us, sacrificing for us, trying to protect our future. But every defense sounded hollow inside my own head. I remembered all the times Marin had asked me to put my phone away during dinner. I remembered telling her I was too tired. I remembered the weekend she wanted to visit a little coastal town together and I cancelled because of work. I remembered her birthday when I bought an expensive gift but barely spent an hour with her because I had a deadline. I had given her things while slowly withholding the one thing she actually wanted from me, my presence. Celeste then told me something that changed the way I saw everything. Marin had not left because she hated me. She had left because she was afraid she was beginning to hate the person she had become inside our marriage. Those words broke something open inside me. I spent the afternoon sitting with Celeste in our living room, talking about Marin, our marriage, and the years I had convinced myself that providing was the same as loving. Celeste admitted that she had been angry with me for a long time. She had watched her sister become quieter and smaller, and she blamed me for it. But she also admitted that Marin had refused every attempt to discuss the problem honestly because she was afraid of being vulnerable. Then came the unexpected truth. Celeste had not come to the house simply to tell me where Marin was. She had come because she had nowhere else to go. Her own relationship had fallen apart. She had lost her apartment after a sudden financial crisis and had been sleeping on a friend's couch. She was embarrassed and ashamed, and she had been too proud to ask anyone for help. Marin had promised to help her after returning from the trip, but now Marin was away, and Celeste didn't know where else to turn. For the first time, I understood why she had stood on my porch and asked if she could come in. She wasn't only carrying her sister's pain. She was carrying her own. I told her she could stay in our guest room for as long as she needed. There was no hesitation. Maybe it was the smallest act of kindness I could offer, but it felt important. Celeste looked at me with surprise, as if she had expected judgment instead of compassion. She thanked me quietly, and I realized that sometimes people don't need you to solve their problems. Sometimes they just need you not to make them feel ashamed for having them. Over the next several days, I didn't chase Marin. I didn't bombard her with messages. I sent one honest note telling her that I understood she needed space and that I was sorry for the ways I had made her feel alone while standing beside her. I told her I wasn't asking her to forgive me immediately. I only wanted her to know that when she was ready to talk, I would listen. Celeste encouraged me to focus on changing rather than convincing Marin that I had changed. So I began doing the things I had postponed for years. I cleaned the house. I repaired the loose garden gate. I cooked dinner instead of ordering takeout. I sat with Celeste when she needed someone to talk to. I started looking for work that would allow me to have a healthier balance. Most importantly, I began confronting the uncomfortable truth that I had spent years measuring my worth by how much I could provide, while forgetting that marriage wasn't an employment contract. One afternoon, nearly 2 weeks after Marin left, the doorbell rang again. This time, when I opened the door, she was standing there. She looked thinner. Tired. Nervous. But she was there. For a moment, neither of us moved. I wanted to run toward her, hold her, tell her everything was going to be okay. Instead, I remembered the promise I had made to listen. So I simply stepped aside and let her enter. Maren looked around the house and noticed Celeste's bag near the stairs. Her face softened when she realized her sister had been staying with us. Celeste came into the hallway, and the two sisters hugged each other for a long time. I watched them and understood that forgiveness doesn't always begin with the person who hurt you. Sometimes it begins when you choose not to add more pain to someone else's life. That afternoon, Maren and I sat together in the garden. The sunlight fell through the leaves, and for the first time in months, neither of us had anywhere else to be. She told me she had expected me to become angry when she left. She expected accusations, resentment, and demands. Instead, she had received an apology. She admitted that she had been wrong too. She had run away instead of speaking honestly. She had allowed resentment to grow because she was afraid that if she told me how lonely she felt, I might not care. I told her that I did care. I had simply been too distracted to show it. She cried then, and so did I. There was no magical sentence that repaired 12 years of mistakes. There was no single hug that erased the hurt. But there was something more important. There was honesty. We decided not to pretend everything was fixed. We agreed to rebuild slowly. We would talk every day without phones between us. We would make time for each other. We would stop assuming that silence meant everything was fine. We would ask for help when we needed it. We would learn to apologize without defending ourselves. Celeste stayed with us for several more weeks while she found a new job and a small apartment. During that time, something beautiful happened. The woman who had once viewed me with suspicion began seeing me differently, and I began seeing her not as Maren's protective younger sister, but as a person who had been struggling quietly behind a confident exterior. One bright afternoon, as the three of us sat around the kitchen table, Maren laughed at something Celeste said. It was an ordinary laugh, but it sounded different from the forced smiles I had heard during those difficult months. I looked at my wife and realized that I didn't want to take that sound for granted ever again. Months later, our marriage was not perfect. In fact, it was more honest than it had ever been. We still disagreed. We still had difficult days. Sometimes old wounds surfaced unexpectedly. But now we talked about them instead of burying them. The blue front door was repainted that summer. The garden grew fuller. Celeste moved into her own apartment and began rebuilding her life. And Maren and I started taking long afternoon walks together, often without speaking much, simply enjoying the fact that we were walking side by side again. One afternoon, we stopped beside the same garden where we had once confronted the possibility of losing each other. Maren reached for my hand. I held it gently, not tightly, because I had finally learned that loving someone isn't about holding them so tightly that they can't leave. It's about becoming the kind of person they feel safe choosing again. Before the ending, I want to ask you something. If you were in Maren's place, would you have stayed and demanded answers, or would you have needed space to find yourself? And if you were Everett, would you have been able to forgive someone who left without explaining? Leave a meaningful comment and tell us what this story taught you about communication, forgiveness, and second chances. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Sometimes the people we love don't leave because they stopped caring. Sometimes they leave because they don't know how to ask us to see their pain. And sometimes, when two people are willing to stop defending themselves and start listening, a broken relationship can become something stronger than it was before. Maren didn't come back because I convinced her to stay. She came back because she finally saw that I was willing to become a better husband, and I didn't ask her to prove her love by forgetting what had happened. I came to understand that love isn't simply about grand promises, expensive gifts, or staying together through the easy years. Love is noticing when someone becomes quiet. Love is asking twice when they say they're fine. Love is putting down the phone, closing the laptop, and looking into the eyes of the person who has been waiting for you to notice them. And sometimes, love is opening the door when someone stands outside and asks, with tears in their eyes, if they can come in. Because you never truly know what someone is carrying when they knock on your door. And sometimes, the person who asks to come inside isn't only asking for a place to stay. They're asking for one more chance to believe that people can still be kind.